Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be covering everything there is to know about Hunter PvP in Classic, including what to do when facing any class, important items to have, what to spec into, what race to go, general ability, gameplay, and pet overviews, as well as nerfs or even buffs added to the class that you need to know in order to start owning once Classic comes around. So let's get started. The Hunter class is one of the strongest and most annoying classes in PvP, and contrary to popular belief, they stay strong even towards the end of Classic, at least in PvP. A Hunter's strength in PvP is being able to stay at range with high mobility, utilizing aspect of the cheetah to control your fights. Just be worried that if you get struck with an instant damaging ability with the buff on, you will get dazed for 4 seconds. Being able to control aspect of the cheetah in fights separates the good hunters and the bad ones. Also, pairing this ability up with humanoid tracking makes you the king of defending objectives, since it's basically a wall hack. Important abilities to keep in mind for Hunter are Scatter Shot, a non-dispellable 4-second CC that breaks on damage with a 30-second cooldown and 15-yard range, which can be increased to 21 yards with the Hawkeye talent. Wing Clip, a 10-second slow which reduces the target's movement speed by 60% and has a chance to immobilize them with the improved Wing Clip talent. Frost Trap, which is similar to Wing Clip, slows targets in an AoE radius once the trap goes off by 60% and has a chance to immobilize them with the entrapment talent. Wyvern Sting is a ranged sleep that lasts 12 seconds and can only be used out of combat while at minimum 8 yards range and maximum of 41 yards. Intimidation is a 3-second stun that your pet uses on its next attack, which has a 1-minute cooldown. And last but not least, the notorious Freezing Trap, which lasts 20 seconds in PvP with a chance to break on heartbeat resist, making it unreliable past 15 seconds and is dispellable as well as broken on damage. So I get asked the most about Scatter and Freezing Trap combo, since in Classic they share a DR with Wyvern Sting, Magic Dust, and Rocket Helmet. People are always telling me that the class is doomed. This mentality simply comes from getting used to private servers, when hunters had this combo engraved into their minds. So how do you get around this nerf, you may ask? Well, the first thing you do is try and eliminate the mindset of setting up a trap with Scatter, wasting any setup ability besides Feign Death to get out of combat for the trap. However, this is not the case with ranged targets, as you will most likely be CC'd or kited if you attempt to go for a straight Feign Death trap combo right at them. In order to get around this on Classic, you need to practice landing grenades on your target to stun them, or if you're spec'd into it, using Wing Clip and or Frost Trap talent to immobilize your target, or even simply using Intimidation for an easy stun setup. By utilizing these talents, you will add more time onto your CC and avoid being punished by Freezing Trap DR. So let's talk about what to spec into as a Hunter in Classic. There's a plethora of choices available to you, but you need to choose for yourself what suits your playstyle the best. I'm just here to give you the strengths and weaknesses of each one. So the first spec we're going to be talking about is a True Shot Survival spec. This is probably the most popular Hunter spec, as it can be used efficiently in PvP and PvE without having to respec. In general, all Hunter specs are going to have marksman talents up to mortal shots, as it's too much damage to pass up on. The strengths of this spec is that it gives you and party members near you a 50 attack power buff for more damage, and a lot of survivability with deterrence, which increases your dodge and parry chance by 25% for 10 seconds, which also stacks with aspect of the monkey, as well as the Night Elf passive racial. You also gain Clever Traps, which increases your trap duration and helps whenever you find yourself in a situation where you had to DR your Freezing Trap, since your trap goes from being 10 seconds to 13 seconds with 2 points into the talent. The spec is great because you are able to switch it around based on your needs. For example, if you find yourself doing more world PvP in 1v1s than battlegrounds, then you might want to take points out of entrapment and put them into improved Wing Clip instead. The Sured-Footed talent isn't only for the hit chance, it's very powerful because it gives you a 15% chance to resist movement impairing effects, such as a warrior's hamstring. In short, this is a great overall spec if you're looking to play all aspects of the game, including PvE and PvP, while sacrificing damage from the Beast Mastery tree to gain more utility for your group and survivability from the survival tree. The next spec is called the Intim Scatter spec, a CC intensive spec which sacrifices survivability for more direct CC and pet damage. This spec is great for solo players who only want to rely on their pet and not other players. The strengths of the spec is that you get Intimidation and conveniently more pet speed in order to catch players trying to run away from you with your pet stun. Another great reason to pick the spec in Classic is because you can use Intimidation as a setup for your freezing trap without penalizing yourself with the DR on trap. With this spec, you really shouldn't try and use Scatter before a freezing trap, since you aren't getting the benefits of clever traps from the survival tree to help you out with a short CC duration. Like the previous spec, there is room to change this one up a little bit based on your playstyle. If you find that you are a player who likes to go in for wing clips onto targets, consider dropping the ranged weapon specialization, which by the way is 5% more damage, and put those points into the survival tree to grab improved wing clip. Personally, I choose to keep the additional 5% damage since the hunter shouldn't be going into melee range much anyways, especially if you aren't benefiting from savage strikes in the survival tree. Personally, I find the spec to be the best for 1v1s, world PvP, or solo battlegrounds. I would say the previous spec is slightly better for pre-mains as a hunter since you are using frost traps so frequently and benefiting from the AoE immobilization proc. But then again, this video wasn't made for me to tell you what spec to go, it's for you to choose what you like the most for your playstyle. The next spec we're going to go over is the Deep BM spec. The strengths of this build is being able to rely on your pet to do most of the work in 1v1s, but you sacrifice your own damage from not getting talents like Barrage in the marksman tree. The efficiency of this spec directly decreases as time goes on and more people get geared up, since your pet doesn't benefit at all from your stats, aside from tier set bonuses. If you find yourself severely undergeared, I would say this spec is great for you, as you benefit greatly from the Bestial Rat talent, which increases your pet's damage by 50% for 18 seconds, and is immune to any type of CC, making the only thing possible stopping it death. Your pet also benefits from passives that simply increase damage output from the Beast Mastery tree. I personally would try to stay away from the spec unless you're leveling or heavily undergeared at 60, as you're too reliant on a 2-minute cooldown. Last but not least, we're going to cover the Wyvern Sting spec. Many see this as a meme spec, but there is lots of potential for this spec in Classic WoW. This spec does require some knowledge about hunter mechanics and is one of the worst specs to play early on, as it's the opposite of the BM spec. It becomes better as you gain more gear. The reason behind this is because of the passive talent, Lightning Reflexes, which increases your overall agility by 15%. But this is only worth grabbing if you have high enough agility already, since you are losing out on the 15% increased damage from multi-shot in the marksman tree. So let's talk about the major ability that you gain from this spec, Wyvern Sting, which many players choose to pass up on because you will need to be out of combat to use it. And the ability itself has a 2-minute cooldown, as well as removable by paladins, shamans, and druids. So after all this, you may be asking, why would you want to choose Wyvern Sting over Scattershot or Intimidation? Well, in the survival tree you gain a lot of close range utility, including counterattack, which is a melee attack that roots the target in place for 5 seconds, and allows you to set up a non-DR'd freezing trap onto your target. You also gain more percentage-based crit and agility, which again is heavily reliant on having a lot of gear. Wyvern Sting itself can be powerful if used perfectly in specific situations. I'll give an example. A shaman and warrior are defending a base in a Wrathy Basin. You can actually fit a flag capture by Wyvern Stinging the shaman, then trapping the warrior and moving on to capture the base. So with this spell, you should be prioritizing paladins, shamans, and sometimes druids, since they are the only class that can depoison this buff off of other players. The spec is better on Alliance than it is on Horde, because paladins are able to bubble out of this CC, while shamans have no way of getting out of it. In this spec, the high skill factor comes in, as Wyvern Sting has a lengthy 2-minute cooldown and requires good positioning to stay out of combat and dead zone, as well as trapping others without Intimidation or Scattershot as a setup. Now that we've got specs down, let's talk a little bit about picking the right race. First of all, never choose your faction based on race. Both Horde and Alliance have good options to choose from. Let's start with the Alliance. You have 2 options to choose from, Dwarf or Night Elf. As a Dwarf, you get Stone Form, allowing you to remove poisons and bleeds off of yourself, including Blind. As a Night Elf, there is an insane amount of things you can do with Shadow Melt. It would take too long to list them all out. The pros of going Dwarf are that you have an easier time versus Rogues and maybe Shadow Priests, but that's about it. Night Elf is the superior choice in PvP and PvE, with increased base agility of course. Being Night Elf gives you an edge versus every class in PvP, especially casters, since you can feign death plus Shadow Melt spells. Being Night Elf also allows you to eat in stealth, meaning even after someone gets out of your trap, you can continue eating and they can't target you unless you have some sort of range AoE, such as Iron Grenades or Blizzard. Shadow Melt is also amazing to combo with a stealth pet, such as Broken Tooth, which we will talk about more later, since you can wait to initiate fights in stealth, or sit and defend your base without the enemy knowing you are there. We'll talk more about Shadow Meld when we cover matchups later in the video, but let's continue on with the Horde side for races. You have 3 choices on Horde: Orc, Tauren, or Troll. Troll racials can't even compete with any of the other hunter races in PvP, but they are the best race for PvE, so choose it for that if you wish. As for Orcs, it's pretty standard. Blood Fury is only melee attack power, and the pet damage is negligible. 25% passive for stun resist is pretty insane and helps with melee classes. This is the most popular choice for hunters on private servers, but I wouldn't say this is the best on classic WoW just yet. Tauren is the remaining race on Horde, and this is the best for classic WoW PvP, and I'll explain why. So let's first look at all the racials for Tauren: 5% base health boost and War Stomp. A 2-second stun on a 2-minute cooldown are the only major ones that you can see. But Taurens actually have a hidden racial that many of you guys saw in the beta: increased melee range as well as increased dead zone and hitbox. So you might be thinking to yourself, why would I choose Tauren when it has a bigger dead zone and my goal is to stay out of the dead zone? Well, I'm here to tell you that you can actually get rid of this increased dead zone whenever you want, and get the regular increased melee range whenever you want also. This is done by abusing Savory Deviate Delights, which are costumes that last 1 hour and give you the standard dead zone and melee range of every other race. You can take advantage of this by actually using this in most fights for smaller dead zone, and then taking it off when trying to melee someone in a route, such as a Mage Nova for example. This isn't the only new buffs to Tauren in Classic WoW. War Stomp is actually much better than what it was on private servers, since it doesn't DR Freezing Chop like Scattershot does, making it the best race on Horde if you can afford the Deviate Delights consistently in PvP. Just keep in mind, if you really don't like looking at the race you picked, don't roll with it, since you will hate staring at that character down the line for hours on end.
PvP items are crucial for hunters. Goblin Rocket Helm charges you toward an enemy and CCs them for 10 seconds. Other players can dispel this, and it's also broken on damage. Iron Grenades are important for every class to have, as it's a 3-second stun that deals a small amount of damage and you can cast it while moving. It's especially important for hunters because you can set up a Feign Death Trap combo onto targets with it. The next items are Goblin Rocket Boots, Gnomish Rocket Boots, and Swift Boots. These 3 boots have their own separate cooldown, and they're all faster than Aspect of the Cheetah. Goblin Rocket Boots are the fastest and have the shortest cooldown, but also have a chance to break, causing you to lose control of your character for 4 seconds. Gnomish Rocket Boots are much safer than Goblin Rocket Boots, and you never have to buy more than one. They're not as fast, and have a 30-minute cooldown though. Swift Boots are the slowest, with only a 10% speed increase from Aspect of the Cheetah, and a 1-hour cooldown. Skull of Impending Doom is the most important PvP item to get, as it's an offhand that increases your speed for 60% while draining your health and mana over 10 seconds. This means you can use this item to break CCs such as Polymorph or Blind. These items are some of the best, but there is much more to Classic to utilize when it comes to nifty gadgets. Generally, your job is to annoy rogues as much as you can. Keep Hunter's Mark on them, as well as Serpent Sting, and once you see a rogue is out of stealth, send your pet to attack him. It'll prevent him from stealthing, as your pet will continue to hit him out of stealth unless he uses Vanish. If you see a rogue closing in on you rapidly, he's either going to blind you or gouge you, so try and use Skull of Impending Doom beforehand. As a hunter, you also have a well-rounded kit for countering druids. Against all druids, your goal is to get them out of bear form so you can do serious damage to them. Otherwise, their high armor will tank all your damage. Take advantage of Scare Beast to bait druids out of bear form, to immediately follow it up with a freezing trap. If you notice a druid isn't coming out of bear form when you use Scare Beast, simply kite them with Wing Clip until they shift out. In BGs, you should do the same thing to druids as you do to rogues, and harass them out of stealth, forcing them to use cooldowns to get away. If you notice a warlock is SL spec with a Voidwalker out, don't bother trying to burst them down, simply keep Viper on them and kite. If you don't see a pet next to the warlock, he's most likely using Succubus, in which you should pre-use Skull of Impending Doom to break out of his charm, then continue to burst them down, or even trap them if you feel the need to. A lot of warlocks will be using Fellhunter in BGs, since it's the most versatile in teamfights with a Dispel and Interrupt. Unless the warlock is fully tank spec, you should try and burst them down before anyone else in the enemy team, since warlocks have no real defensive to your heavy physical burst. They will melt without the high armor that other classes have. Warriors are usually top priority to keep up for the enemy healers, so they will most likely be Dispel spammed in teamfights. By using Scatter Shot on warriors, you keep them out of the fight for 4 seconds unless a teammate breaks it, or the warrior sacrifices their two-hander to equip a Skull of Impending Doom, which is pretty uncommon. Mages in Classic WoW don't have life tap like a warlock, so keep Viper Sting on them always, and try to use your environment to dodge your slows until they are with Aspect of the Cheetah. If you see a mage casting Polymorph on you, there's a 1.5 second window to use Skull of Impending Doom, which by the way isn't affected by your global cooldown since it's a gear item. Keep your pet on mages, and when you see them trying to sheep your pet, immediately multi-shot them in the middle of their cast. Any kind of boost would help a lot versus mages, since you can dodge all their instant CCs such as Nova and Cone of Cold. Spider Belt is a great item to have since it breaks their Nova and gives you immunity to immobilizing effects for another 5 seconds. Don't be afraid to use Freezing Trap on a mage, since you are forcing them a major 5-minute cooldown, Ice Block, which is great trade in the long run. Paladins are one of the most annoying to deal with, since they can cleanse your Viper Sting and bubble out of every one of your CCs. They also wear plate armor, making it really hard to kill them. The good news is, Paladins have almost no way of getting directly into your dead zone, so you don't have to worry about them killing you. Paladins are probably the one class you want to avoid interacting with, since it's a pain to kill them or land any kind of CC. Against Shamans, you want to avoid their 20-yard Frost Shock, and make sure they aren't getting any major burst off with Chain Lightning by utilizing Scatter Shot. Always be sure to break Grounding Totem in order to land your Freezing Trap, or else the totem will just eat it. Avoid using Viper Sting on a Shaman, as they will just cleanse it, and make sure to send your pet to destroy their totems throughout the fight. You will run into a lot of hunters, especially while leveling, since most other classes are grinding out dungeons in Classic WoW. Be sure to feign death and trap the pet if you can, otherwise keep Serpent Sting on them while kiting the pet with Wing Clip. Most hunters also keep Aspect of the Cheetah on, so you can simply send your pet in on them to daze them while they're chasing you or running away. When you see a priest, always be sure to use Gnomish Netomatic on them if you have it equipped, as they have no way of getting out of it unless they have a free action potion on or Spider Belt equipped. Keep Viper on priests at all times, since they usually burn themselves through their own mana pool relatively fast, and they don't have any way of getting rid of it. If you notice the priest is the only healer near you, it's usually worth it to go for a trap on them. Just be wary of their AoE fear and try to dodge it by baiting a trap. Next up, we're going to be talking quickly about pets. In Classic, you don't have too many options, since Lupus was nerfed in this patch and no longer does shadow damage on auto attacks. The only real choices left are Broken Tooth, Wind Serpent, and some people are running Boar. I'll let you know in advance that this pet is really bad though. Wind Serpent is decent because it's the only pet left that does magic damage, meaning it goes through armor, but it's also ranged, meaning it's harder for rogues and other classes to try and kite it. And being Rooted still allows for your pet to do a decent amount of damage. On top of that, since each ability costs 50 energy to cast, Wind Serpents have insane amount of burst. The Boar pet is only used because it's the only pet with a CC. Sorry, but spiders don't have webs in Classic. They have a 1 second root after they charge someone, but they lack the damage that other pets have, which makes it a bad choice for hunters. Broken Tooth on the other hand has a 1.0 attack speed and higher DPS than the previous choices, and puts severe pushback on casters, making it nearly impossible to cast with the pet on them, unless they use a barrier of some sort. I also wanted to quickly mention that melee weaving was fixed in Classic, meaning you can now use melee attacks in between your auto shots in order to maximize your damage done. This goes for any ability for hunters, as you should always have a shot timer add-on such as Yacht all throughout Classic to use abilities between your auto shots. I'll be linking this add-on in the description if you guys want to get it. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.